Early summer, when a young man's fancy has already turned to thoughts of, well, never mind what their fancies turn to. You have other things on your mind, like trudging through the new melted paths along the base of Pikes Peak. You walk through the doors of the Anselm Society Digital Pub, feeling like the loneliest person in the world. The interior is filled with couples, all discussing arts and faith together. In the corner, by the fire, is a table of 5 people, the Believe to See table. 4 of them are happily part of couples. The last person, staring at his pint and trying not to look like the fifth wheel, is me, your co-host Matt Mellema. So welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. As I said, I'm Matt Mellema, joined here by my co-host for the day. I didn't tell her I was doing this, but Evangeline, you're my co-host today.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
The co-host designation has become increasingly unimportant, but, whatever. I just sort of...
Thanks, Matt.
We have guests on. One of them gets but you get it. So, like, assistant to the regional manager or something.
Nice.
So, we're in a good group here to discuss something that I have wanted to get off my chest for a while. But first of all, I should introduce everyone. Then you can hear my really cool idea. So, as you may have heard me imply very subtly in the intro, this is a couples day. So we have Evangeline and Corey Denmark. Corey, say hello.
Hi there.
If you want, you can be another co-host. I don't, whatever.
Sure. I'll be a Dwight.
He's
Okay.
just giving it away.
Assistant to the assistant.
Assistant to the assistant. Right.
Nice. I'm an assistant.
And we also have Dan and Elena Sorensen,
Hello.
Hi.
who are also co-hosts today. So that really worked out well.
Wait, who's the assistant? Should we go ahead and get
I'm the
into?
assistant.
There you go.
That's my management style. I just let everyone work this out amongst themselves. So here's my idea. I am a fan of weird pets. I currently only have a dog because my wife has assumed, probably correctly, that if we had a weird pet, the responsibility would fall to her and it would make a mess of our house. But then a couple months ago, I saw this YouTube video. It was a TED Talk by this guy, the scientist in Australia, who is convinced that he can bring back the thylacine. You guys are aware of thylacines?
Yes, obviously.
Okay.
They're my favorite.
Well,
thing.
for those of you who may not know, thylacine is also known as the Tasmanian tiger, and they were the coolest animals. Their close living relative is the Tasmanian devil. Picture them as sort of a mix between a wolf and a kangaroo. They were so cool. But then, in the early 1900s, idiot, European settlers to Tasmania decided, hey, these awesome animals might eat our chickens maybe, so let's kill them all. So they did. So they are extinct.
European settlers.
They're the worst, aren't they?
They are.
Friggin' white people. But anyway, so they went extinct in 1933. But this guy, scientist, who I'm like 60% sure isn't a crackpot, he said he thinks they have enough preserved DNA from museum specimens to one day bring back the thylacine. And he noted that reports from back in the day indicated that they were actually very sweet and affectionate and would make great pets.
Would not eat people's chickens.
No.
Or children.
You see, those Tasmanians, they didn't know anything. But I asked Danielle, hey, if the thylacine is brought back from extinction, can we get one as a pet? And she said yes.
Awesome.
Oh, you're in, man.
I think that means she doesn't think that they're ever going to come back. But I am remembering, I'm saying on the podcast. So for the table, how would you feel about a pet Tasmanian tiger?
Oh yeah.
It might be pretty sweet.
Probably wouldn't be that much different than 2 teenage boys in a house.
Probably not.
So for those of you who haven't seen it, I recommend YouTubing it. Maybe not the talk because you might think he's a nut, but whatever. So now that we've all agreed on that, let's find something else we can all agree on. So today's theme is couples who art. Is that right use of the verb?
That's totally
That's
true.
the way we use it.
Oh, good. So all 4 of you are members of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. You are all 4 artists, and you are coupled with another artist. So we want to talk about all these different intricacies about couples who art together. But before we do that, let's have everyone go through their art, and this will be an adorable way to start the podcast. Tell me how you guys met, because I want to know. What's the tea?
Okay, so I'm Corey Denmark. I'm primarily a visual artist, although I have dabbled in a number of other items. I am an engineer by trade, so that between the two, I can usually sate my creative itch. I'll let Evangeline introduce herself, and then we can discuss how we met.
Okay.
Oh, so you're sort of sloughing the how we met story off to Evangeline.
I'm not necessarily, but I'll let her introduce herself, and then we can discuss.
And I'd also like to say Corey has been on the podcast a couple times before. One of his earlier ones, he talked about creating art by shooting lightning through wood.
Yes.
And we are actually recording at the Denmark house. I've seen it proudly displayed here.
Which is still standing and has not been burned
Has
down.
not burned down
As
yet.
of this podcast.
Corey is still alive. But anyway, Evangeline.
So I'm Evangeline Denmark. I am married to Corey, and I'm a writer. I write mostly fantasy, mostly for young adults, but other projects here and there. And should I go ahead and say how we met?
Sure, yeah.
We met in college. So Corey saw me, a couple days before I went to this, college night thing at a local church. I had opened the door into my face, which is not something that is uncommon for me. I'm fairly clumsy and easily distractible and not very observant. And so I had a big scab and bruise on my face. And Corey saw me and thought, well, she's pretty brave to come out looking like that. I bet she has a good story. So I literally was that girl who had a good personality.
Yeah. And to try to attract her, I did handstands.
Yes, he did.
I did handstands.
Did you successfully do it?
I did. And I got her phone number. Well, I didn't get it directly from her. I got it from her friend, which is the way you do it, right? Because
We were a couple of
I'm an
dorks.
introvert, so I don't
Now,
talk to people.
this, by the way, is very typical of the college guy. What's the best way to attract a girl? I know, I'll do my awesome handstands.
That's what I can do. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, don't argue with success. So, Elena and Dan, I hope you have an equally cute story.
No handstands.
Yeah, no handstands, but there was a desert, so.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm Elena Sorensen, and I'm a writer, and
She has also been on the podcast before. She was talking about fairy tales. Go listen to that one, too. We have an extensive catalog now. Anyway.
that's right. So I'm currently chipping away at the concrete of a book that is in the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a big block of concrete.
Now, I'm going to play armchair psychoanalyst. Concrete. Why not marble?
Because it's dusty and ugly, and marble is beautiful in the hands of a more practiced.
We really went to a dark place there. Anyway, keep going. Good, I didn't say anything.
No one said anything but you, so everyone's agreeing.
So, I'm Dan Sorensen, and
He's also been on the podcast before. Listen to his.
And I'm a visual artist, and we met at an arts conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh.
And
Santa Fe,
she had me
the land of enchantment.
Yes.
She had me at I Write Fairy Tales, and
Aww.
that was it.
He had me at I paid off all my student loans. And I mean, I thought his art was great. It was great. But the fact that he had managed to pay down his student loans very diligently made me wonder if he was someone worth
He's not a
marrying.
starving artist.
I like that. It's sort of like a Jane Austen heroine calculation. Like, well, no debts. He has a steady income.
That's right.
No scandals in his family. All right, let's do
And
this.
Yeah.
he had because he was because he was a working artist at the time. He did have about 50 pounds per annum, if you want to translate that. Let's say we were both poor as church mice. I'll just say that.
Yes.
Okay, so now that we have all of the cuteness established, first question for everybody. So there's this little refrain that goes around, like opposites attract, blah 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 blah. So I am in a mixed marriage, in a sense, where Danielle, who was on the show, wasn't she great? Everyone tell her how great she was. Yes, I thought she was great. But she does not consider herself an artist. She's in marketing communications, so she's a good writer. She's good at all that stuff, but she would not call herself an artist. So I am trying to figure out, is it more the norm to have a weirdo artist, I'm pointing at myself, normal person, I'm pointing off to Danielle, or is it more likely that the two weirdo artists meet? So for you guys, did the fact that you were both, all four of you, were weirdo artists, do you think that drew each other to you?
Well, I was in engineering school when I met her doing her English degree, and I was in the middle of a relatively long hiatus from doing art. Although I was working at a facility that we did, it was like a service house where we did artistic type things, but I wasn't doing art. I was taking other people's art and manipulating it and creating something else. But I was not doing a lot of drawing and any of that sort of thing at the time. So it wasn't art necessarily that brought us together, at least not in the beginning.
No. To go along with what Elena was talking about, there was an element of, serious engineering students. And Corey and I are 6 years apart. So
One of us will make money at
right,
least.
Exactly. I was 18 and he was 24 when we met, and he was very serious about finishing his, degree.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want to get married until I had a job, so.
Yeah, he was very practical, and I
Eventually didn't want to get married until you had a job either. So
I've always known that I was not going to be the practical one in whatever relationship. So I think there was an element of opposites attract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was, to some degree in that case. Yeah.
Okay, so it almost sounds like you met as opposites, but then the art grew you both together.
We grew together.
I'm really impressed by how beautiful my words are right now.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Dana Lane, sounds like you guys met at an arts conference.
Yeah, so that we had that going for us. I mean, everybody there was already artistic in whatever their chosen art form was, and so it's kind of a closed environment for that when we met. But certainly meeting someone who's an artist helps them understand me better than somebody who isn't.
Yeah, I think we had a common language just to start with. I think we talked a lot about kitsch initially.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know
Yeah.
what your feelings were about kitsch.
So are you both pro-kitsch or anti-kitsch?
Well, I'm pro kitsch. I love the dogs.
I didn't see that coming.
I love the dogs playing poker.
Now I know what to get for our.
All right. Well, here goes this.
And I love Elvis and Jesus on the velvet. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can't speak enough about that.
So meaningful.
But yeah,
That is so
I think
funny.
I really wanted to engage with Dan because it's funny because when you're at conferences, the world is just so much more beautiful because you're with a bunch of like-minded people.
Yeah.
And then when you're away from the conference, it's like I got to do everything I can to get back into that realm. So I think Dan and I engaged each other really fiercely. I think we talked about kitsch to begin with,
Yeah.
and then we talked about writing letters to each other,
Aww.
and then I don't know. I think we talked about student loans. Of course, I didn't let him know how much I had in the bank.
Elena did everything she could to discreetly establish his finances.
You gotta
Be like,
see-
okay,
you
sufficient
gotta see-
income.
yeah.
Okay,
Gotta set
good.
the hook.
And we talked about fairy tales, and I don't know. I told him about the time I went to like a figure drawing class, and I don't know. I think we just tried to make it as interesting, as spicy as possible because we only had 1 week in which to work.
That's funny.
Nice.
So,
I love how you start your first conversation was about kitsch, and you are now saying you wanted to make it as spicy as possible. The spicy kitsch talk. Okay.
It's very important.
Very important. Yeah.
Okay, so you two are both artists, but you're different kinds of artists. So you're a writer, you are a visual artist.
Yes.
Was that like a plus in your minds? It's like, ooh, a different kind of artist. This is new and exciting. Because, I don't know,
Yes.
can writers really marry each other?
Well, that's.
I don't know if this is a good idea.
Question. I don't think I would have liked dating or marrying another artist in my same vein. So someone that was completely different, even if they were like a watercolorist or fine art. I'm more of an illustrator, and so if they're more of a sculptor or pottery, that's for me. That's far enough removed from what I do. But if they were like specifically the same type of an illustrator as I am, I know I certainly would have a lot of insecurities about that.
I wouldn't want to date a sculptor. I feel like they're very snooty. I don't know. So Elena, could you have ever seen yourself, like, if he was same dude, but like, oh, I'm a writer, I live in Brooklyn and I have this really awesome blog you should read. Does the fact that he wasn't in your same medium, was that a plus?
It was a plus. I think writers are kind of, well, we all know that they're the shy egoists. I just happen to think they're real egoists. I forget the shy part.
Me and Evangeline are both nodding on, like, yeah, that's all right, yeah, okay.
And I kind of do wonder if he had been a writer, if there would just have been this strange element of competition between us, as you often read about or see in the movies, you know.
And even though we're completely different, there's still that same language. Like, she has told me a lot about her struggles, and I completely understand it in my medium. And so it's we relate, can easily understand each other, and we talk to any other artist.
You can talk about symbols and inspiration and what you're trying to do. One of the things that we often end up talking about, it's not what I envisioned, and I can say that about what's on the page, and he can say that or says that about what's what he's drawn or painted or whatever, and that's that common ground, but it's a different medium.
Okay, so I'll say, just as a writer, I could see it being very difficult to be married to another writer, because there is that element, even if you were both like, oh yeah, we're super cool, that you're working on different projects. This seems like a limited run Hulu series, right? Where one of them becomes extremely successful, the other one like is slowly driven insane by the guilt. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. Wait a sec.
That's probably maybe we should collaborate.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I think that because my output is so small, I equal about half a word a day at this point in the game.
But they're really good half words.
They're really good.
Yesterday she wrote sprint, and today she added the ED. So
that's right.
The tense, it makes the whole word.
Yeah, I feel that I'm winning. But I do wonder if output has something to do with that. I think Dan and I both create in spurts and bursts, and sometimes when we're handed deadlines, we just sob gratefully on the floor that there's something that's prompting us to work towards something tangible. So I think because my output is so minimal, for me it would have been, I think, very hard to marry another writer who might have been either less of a writing less, in which case I would have probably said, hey, you should probably write a little bit more, or writing so much more, and I would have said, hey, let's get a divorce.
Can you imagine the frustration of sitting there, both of you with your laptops, and they're like tap 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 tap, tap, and you're like, oh, tap tap.
Yeah.
That would be so depressing.
If you have writer's block and the other one is just tapping away.
Hey, I sold another short story.
That would just eat you alive. I know it.
I don't care what I'm doing. Make it sound like I'm doing better.
Recipe for homicide.
Yes.
You just sit there across the room. I hate you.
It would be interesting to hear someone's perspective. I know we have some other couples in the guild that are artists, and their spouse is an artist as well, but I don't know of any that they're both in the same exact genre.
Yeah.
Because I know we have some artists and dancers, and then we have some others that are kind of metal workers and painters, drawers, and some other.
I was thinking you got to do round 2 of this.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Maybe we can find some that have.
Oh, so there's this great moment at one of our last guild meetings where we're going around, and we're all just what do you do? Writer, and then probably future guest silversmith.
Yeah, right.
It was so friggin' cool.
He got an applause, I think.
Yeah. It was cool.
That's a real art form.
Yeah, we all had envy.
But so let's sort of transition now to, okay, so we meet. That's cool. But then the collaboration, because I know you have all tried to collaborate with each other as couples. Mm-hmm. So first question, how did you get into that? Who had the idea? And second, which keep in the back of your mind, how did that go? And does the fact that you're married make it easier or harder?
Well, it's interesting because, Evangeline published her book and Curio, and then we were faced with we need a website, we need some paraphernalia for conferences and, all this other stuff. And then we're like, okay, well, we're going to all these nerdy conferences where there's a lot of, sci-fi and steampunk and other things. And we're like, well, okay, well, maybe we should have some costumes. I'm like, ooh, I can do that. So I started making like leather belts and hats and other steampunky type things, little metal adornments and stuff like that for costumes.
And just so you can picture it right now, he's wearing all of this as we speak.
Yeah.
Clink, 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 clink.
I look like an automaton. Yes, right. But it was like an interesting, she had characters in her book, and we were like, okay, well, one of them is kind of has some alchemy aspects to it. It's like, okay, well, let's get like a belt with like, test tubes and chemicals and things like that, and the clockwork and all kinds of neat stuff. And so that's kind of how we ended up starting to collaborate in art, in an artistic sense. Mm-hmm. And then more recently, she's been writing various different genres, and she will say some things about what she's writing, and it'll kind of spark something, and I'll paint something along those lines. And then that will then feed back into her and go, oh, yeah, well, I'd like to wrap some of this back into my story because that looks really,
Well, we got to talk about what happened over Christmas, because that sort of went south. So.
Oh, yes, please do.
So
he leans forward in his chair.
Right. So Anselm put out we were doing an artist night for our Christmas party. And so they put out a call for submissions. And so I had an idea that kind of tied into the book that I'm working on, which is inspired by Celtic mythology. And I wanted to do a story about a white stag, which has a lot of symbolism. I'm working on this, and I mentioned it to Corey that I'm doing this. He goes off and, like, in a day creates this amazing piece of art it's a combination of painting and wood burning. That's this amazing white stag with these wood-burned antlers. And
I can confirm it's very cool. I hope that does... Oh.
I am stuck in writer's block, like half a word a day. Can't get this. I mean, this was my idea. This was my story, and he just, like, took it and was inspired, which is fantastic. I don't want him not to be inspired, but I want to be equally inspired. And it took me forever to write that stinking short story, which is like 6-8 pages. And it just would not come. So we do that. I'll share an idea and because art, I don't know, for him it seems to take less time. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's just us. But when you're working on a 100,000 word novel, for me that's 6 months to a year at least.
Yeah, the different genres for sure have different timetables and different creative energies. Some of it's more bursty, some of it has to be strung out over time. And I have to say that
it requires a strung out artist.
Strung out artist, right? No,
some artists can do it. Some artists are just strung out. So.
I might lose interest in a project if I had to work on it for 6 months. It's just my personality.
So can I throw out this totally crackpot theory? This is the sort of thing where once you guys really hit it big, I'll have like a think piece in the Atlantic. So Evangeline, you write YA, you have fantasy, but you also have a lot of steampunk in it. You've actually been in an episode about steampunk. Go back and listen to it. But here's my theory. You were married to an engineer. Steampunk. It's all about gears, engineering stuff. Does the fact that you were married to an engineer, has that by osmosis seeped into your subconscious and come out through your computer as steampunk?
I have no idea. I don't think so. I'm
pretty sure that's right.
Okay, Matt.
Matt says it's so. I just know that I have to go to Corey and say, will you science for me?
Yeah.
Because
there's a number of contraptions in her book that it's like...
that he designed.
Here's what I want. I want this thing to fly. I want it to burn something.
Right.
And can you come up with some science? And I'm like, yeah. Well, there's all these scientific principles, and we can create hydrogen and oxygen by electricity, and we can... the electricity can be generated from a steam engine, but the steam engine can be powered by this mythical, coal-like substance that you came up with. And some of the science comes out of it, and I just feed her some stuff, and she goes, oh, okay, I can write about that.
Yes, the airship in Curio is entirely his.
So she puts it in, pretty words, and, I try to
Science is
I try to explain it to her, and she glazes over, and then I
Hey.
give her the highlights, and then she writes them down.
Well, the Bernoulli principle says,
Exactly.
Explain like you were explaining to a child.
like I'm a
Cartoon, miss.
10-year-old.
Right.
Okay, how about now an 8-year-old?
Yes.
5-year-old.
5-year-old.
Perfect. Stop there.
Okay, so Sorensens,
Yeah.
tell me about your collaboration and what made you start getting into that.
Well, it's only natural, I think.
Your two genres sort of feed
Yeah.
into each other.
Certainly.
Too.
So we do have a project that we are in the kind of gestation period of it, where it's just.
Would you care to share it with the world?
Well, certainly,
Yes,
yeah.
So we are thinking about making a book of curated American fairy tales. So these are not original fairy tales to me. They would be fairy tales that I've sort of plucked from the centuries, from the 1600s onwards. So
Oh my.
yes, and it's sort of like was really inspired by The Witch, the movie The Witch.
Oh wow.
Yes, yeah. So I come from New England.
That's
which is
another
lovely.
thing I wouldn't have seen coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, well, we love The Witch, the movie. Yeah, so I come from New England, which is, I don't know, the land of weird religion and folklore and superstition. Not to say that other parts of the U.S. don't have that to offer, but
We try.
yeah. But it was interesting to me how much stuff had come over from England, how much lore about mermaids and witches had sort of grounded themselves in some American thought, and it was kind of mixed up with Puritanism and
Oh.
yeah.
Oh.
I want this book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you
well,
sold
you'll
me.
get it. Yeah.
Please go
Yeah.
write it.
Right.
Well, I have a lot of tales and songs and legends to choose from. So that's kind of the beginning process of it. And then Dan will be the illustrator.
Yeah.
We have been looking at a lot of anthologies lately of old tales with new illustrators, new illustrations, and some of them are just awesome. Actually, most of them are awesome. And we want to do the
Inspiring.
same. Yeah, we want to do the same thing.
So yeah, so. That's
So
the
Dan,
process.
how would that work for you then? Because a lot of your style is, there's a whimsical character
Yeah.
to it. How's that gonna handle with the witches
No,
and the
that-
Puritans?
That's a great question. Just me as an illustrator, like I do well when there's a project before me, when I have source material to draw from, and then I can create the illustration to go to that story. And yeah, I do want to do other styles. So this is
And as an illustrator, you've been trained to do many styles.
Certainly.
You have your own personal style
Mhm.
as your own personal illustrator, but you have a lot to offer in terms of
Yeah.
other styles.
yeah, I look forward to doing that and designing the book as well. Some smaller things that you and I have done together is just more work related, where any of my resumes or cover letters or things like that need edited, you help me out on. And then I will do design for your business cards or your website. So
Those are the smaller practical
yeah,
ways that we
so-
collaborate. Yeah.
we're helping in little things. One fun thing we did was a little it's called a PowerPoint party, where a couple showed up and they had a little
What?
they had a
Yeah.
little fun, like, interesting fact about their lives. You put a PowerPoint, you get up and you tell and you show it to everybody. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. And,
PowerPoint party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did what you did on how to
Yes.
write a romance novel.
How to write a romance
It's very
novel
snarky.
in 5 easy steps.
5 easy steps.
And I did the boring word stuff, and
And I went
Dan
to town on
went to town.
bad romance graphic novel
covers.
There's a lot out there to work with.
Yeah, so
Yeah, and there were many children, so we all sent them to. They were sent to their rooms while we did our PowerPoint presentation.
Censored PowerPoints.
Exactly.
it was definitely a lot of fun.
I very much want to see this PowerPoint presentation.
And we'll send it to you. In fact,
Yeah.
we'll send it to you
Oh,
too.
No,
Oh,
no,
thank
no.
you.
No,
Yes.
it must be presented.
Oh, okay.
All right, we'll
Oh.
do that.
Yeah, but
That's a good idea.
Performance art.
Well,
I mean, we've heard you read, Elena, and we need it.
Yes, and some should
That's
have a
wonderful.
PowerPoint
We should
party.
post and read it. How to write.
And
Bad
for every
romance
minute
novel.
you went over the allotted time frame, you had to drink. I think was
Ah.
Oh, yeah.
was part of it.
Sounds
Fun
fun.
drinking party.
Well, this also took a different turn than I saw it going. I've told you that I was writing a vampire Christian romance novel, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
It has been done. You know
Really?
about Amish vampires in space, right?
Oh.
Yes.
Amish
there is
vampires, that's a good
There
idea.
is a book called Amish Vampires in Space.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think I saw Bethany House just put it out. You know, like,
Yeah, well, no, for real. It's really a thing.
It's a bonnet ripper where the bonnet just floats away. 'cause
Now,
it's-
hey, I have like bonnet ripper is my phrase. I used to
Sure.
always say that I wanted to write a bonnet ripper, which isn't.
Okay.
One final point. Are you going to include any of like the lumberjack tales in your American folklore?
oh yes, I think so. And of course, those came like a lot later.
Yes.
They were-
So I was at the hospital after my third son was born. When I wasn't standing vigilant over his cradle like any good father was, I went down this weird Wikipedia hole on lumberjack like folklore and like tall tales.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. Really, they're so weird. J.K. Rowling is a big fan of them too.
Of tall tales.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This is what I learned at the hospital. But anyway, let's sort of go from like the substance of how you're collaborating to like how difficult was it to collaborate with a spouse? Because I'll give you some background on my experience. I've been doing a collaboration project with my brother for a while, who is a graphic artist, and I have found in some ways it is much easier to collaborate with my brother because we have sort of similar temperaments. And it's also the sort of thing like you can, because we know each other, so we can be like, no, I'm not going to do that. Stop giving me those suggestions. You know, like he can just tell me off and it's not a big deal. But also it's sort of tough because there are times when both of us want to like, hey, get me your stuff here. And you can't do that with a family member as easily as you can with like a total stranger out there. Brian, by the way, you owe me illustrations for the latest series. Do this. Evangeline and Corey.
So early collaborations for us involved me helping her work on website stuff for her books, and that never went well. It was, I would do something because I thought, hey, this looks neat and everything. She's like, no, it's not quite the right vision for me, what I wanted. And so I was not liking the practical, me being the web designer and not having my own vision of it. It was because it's her that owned it, basically. It was her project, and I'm creating a website for her project. So she would say it's not right, and I'd get frustrated because it just wasn't. I was having trouble finding her vision in what I was doing. And then it was like, okay, well, now we need to update it. Now we need to do this. And it was just like, okay, well, this is rubbing us raw here. And how about you go get somebody else to do it? As much as I would love to enjoy doing it for you, it's not happening right.
Well, I think what you said about finding your own vision, it's really hard. I mean, it's hard to work with anybody to work on a website to express who you are and express your vision. That's just across the board. That's hard. But I think what's really worked for us is when he has had his own vision that was, inspired by something in my book, and he wants to go and make a wood cutting or a painting or whatever of it, and then that's his vision as well. I mean, the artwork is what he sees in his head. It doesn't matter that it was about a fox and a moon or whatever. It was his vision. And so those are separate things. So I don't look at that and say, well, that's not what I imagined, because it's just different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's kind of the way it was. It was like I had to convey the information that she wanted to convey in her website.
Right, rather than what you wanted.
Rather than what I wanted. So that's where we had some kind of creative headbutting going on. Mm-hmm. And some of it was practical too, because I'm like, well, what you want to do, I don't know how to do technically, because I did some web development back when blinking text was one of those fancy things that we could do with HTML 1.0, and now they've got all these widgets and stuff, and I'm like, I don't have the time and energy to keep up with this. We should find some young, person that has the energy to keep up with HTML4 and HTML5.
Work. Yeah.
Right. So let me get back to my engineering satellites, and you can go do your web stuff somewhere else.
Yeah, I do think that is just a tough thing, especially when it's like writer, visual artist collaboration, because I feel like a lot of writers, I'm looking at myself especially, they have a very particular vision for how it is. They assume their own vision is, well, obviously it's the right vision, because I wrote the words, so I would say, no, how the picture should look too. And then you try to pass that along to another person who knows more about visual representation than you do, but it's very easy to just basically like, okay, you can be like the paintbrush in my hand. I'll tell you what to do, and you just do everything. So go, little artist robot.
Yeah.
That is always my tendency, but I mean, it's stupid. It's never going to work.
Doesn't work. No.
Yeah. You know, for our project, I recognize that tendency in myself. I think I have my tastes run toward Arthur Rackham and Walter Crane.
I love Arthur Rackham.
Yeah, Arthur Rackham is just the best.
I know.
And but I also think that my tastes are really, really limited. I have a certain aesthetic and Dan has a lot more understanding and knowledge and scope and depth of understanding as far as illustration is concerned. So in a way, I know exactly what you're talking about, Matt, because I would love to art direct him to death. But
just sort of stand over his shoulder. Okay.
No, wrong.
Make the nose a little longer. Shorter. Okay.
Erase that line. That is too liney.
Yeah, no, I've worked for too many bosses like that.
I know, and we've talked about it.
Yeah.
You know, you come home grumbling because you've been too art directed in
Yeah.
certain
Micromanaged.
jobs. And,
Yeah.
It's hard when you're doing art.
yeah.
But I still am, like, I find your input important. Like, I'm not going to run off and just do an illustration and expect you to, well, that's it. So you don't have any choice or say in it. I do ask for feedback and look and,
Yeah.
you know, and none of the feedback you've ever given has ever been directorial or micromanaging.
I've stifled it deep then.
I restrained.
Yeah, I know. But I
yes.
suppose that it being our project, I would want a larger stake. And I think that I would have to be really conscious about fighting my desire to ask you to do something like make it less liney. You know? So yeah, I mean, there are some pitfalls there.
Yes. So I think another thing I have noticed, like this collaboration with my brother, like for as much as Danielle pretends she's not arty, like we actually have done some sort of collaboration because, you know, she has a marketing and PR background, so she's really good at social media, getting all that stuff organized, marketing. So when I had a project I was working on, I was like, hey, do you want to like be my VP of marketing or something? I said in exchange for that, I would give her 100% of the profits of my book. And
Perfect.
it worked well in the sense that, you know, she's a lot better at it than me. So that was better. But in other ways, it was tough because, one, there's always this thing like, am I sort of taking advantage of this relationship? Like, I wouldn't ask just some person to do all this for me for free, but I'm expecting my wife to use what little free time she has to help my project. Or like, same thing with my brother. Like, Dan, I would never go up to you like, hey, I have this big project. I expect you to collaborate on it with me for free. It'll take a couple weeks of hard work for you to do. I'll get you my notes next week. Do it. But because, you know, we're collaborating with my brother, I feel like I can do that, which probably isn't fair. I hope Brian's not listening to this. Get your artwork done. But have any of you noticed those dynamics going?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, back to the aforementioned website. Apparently, we have some issues with the website.
Well, we knew that we had to have a presence for her, and trying to get that out there, I think it was frustrating because we had a pseudo deadline. We needed to have something out there because the book was impending and people were going to start wanting to find more content.
Yeah, but thankfully they've stopped.
Yeah, right. Yeah, get out of here. Go away.
No one wants to find me these days.
The website says go away.
Yeah, right.
So, Dan or Elena, have you ever, either one of you gotten, oh, I kind of gave that person a lot of my work to do?
Well, I think in recent years, Dan has gotten a lot of requests. Well, a few requests. Probably once every financial quarter, somebody will email him and say, hey, I have a book idea. Would you illustrate it? And then we'll split the proceeds. And what Dan and I understand that means is that this is a big gamble. And there's a lot of upfront work with no real promise of payoff. And it's hard because you don't want to squash anyone's artistic dreams or anything, or literary dreams. But it does seem to be a lot of people who are like, hey, you do fun illustrations.
You can just rip them out.
Help me out. Yeah.
It's easy.
And then we'll both lean into the blue glow of the computer and say, no, you have to pay us up front.
And I think for us, any collaboration we're doing, it really depends on what life is like.
Yeah.
You know, how much time do we have to give? You know, what's expected? You know, can this wait? So.
Can this wait?
It's
been waiting.
I knew we'd break through to the good stuff. Okay, let's go.
Dan, give me that artwork. If you're listening.
Well, that brochure is on that topic that we said we weren't going to discuss about never having time to create, right? But it's a real thing.
That's a given.
It's
Yeah.
In life, all creatives feel that they don't have enough time to get done what they would like to get done. So.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was the only one. That's one of my favorite things to complain about.
Yeah.
Yep. Here too.
Happens at a lot of our guild meetings.
I don't have any friggin' time to create. We're all like, yeah, I know. Yeah.
What are we all doing sitting here talking to each other?
Commiserating.
So, as we're kind of wrapping up on time here, so I'd like these last things for you to say is let's think about the single people out there, those single artists who just every night they just go out into the yard, stare dreamily up at the moon, and think, oh, is there this artistic kindred spirit for me? Should you try to talk them out of marrying another artist? Like, hey, marry someone in finance, or be like, hey, joint artist marriages are a good thing.
We regularly tell our artsy son that he needs to find a doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Well, having a practical skill that you can use to feed yourself, that's one of my main, that's what I tell artists. It's like, it's great you have art, you need to be able to feed yourself. So maybe do art and, business management or something. I don't know what it is you want to do with that, but it's a difficult topic to talk to people about sometimes.
But it is really good. It is, I don't know how many times Corey, because he knows the process of creating art, has been able to understand, where I'm at and my frustration. And that is, I can't imagine trying to explain that to someone who's just
fully practical.
Fully practical, right? Could they ever really understand the frustration of, this is just not what I wanted it to be? And he's like, yeah, I get that.
Well, we do have a lot of friends who are creatives who have a spouse that is not. And they can get kind of like, well, are you really going to, do something practical for the family? Are you going to make some money for us? You're going to,
oh, yeah.
If you can't make money in 5 years, whatever this thing your dream is, then we need to really restructure what it is you're really going to be doing for us as a family.
That's
right?
rough.
That's very rough.
Yeah. So that's very stagnating for a creative to be in that position too. So
very thankful Corey's never not supported my writing.
Okay, so Elena, let me set the scene for you.
All right.
Okay, there's this girl. She's out there pining under the moon, and she is caught in this sort of Jane Austen love triangle. One of them is the banker who has a very nice steady job downtown. The other one is the artistic bad boy.
Oh.
Both are equally dashing, so take that off the table.
All right.
Okay, which one?
Well, the writer in me says go for the penniless sitar player. Yes.
Ooh, that's much better. Yes, penniless sitar player.
Do it. I think. Well, Thomas Hardy wrote that novel Under the Greenwood Trees, where the girl totally went for the poor farmer type, and I think they were happy. And so I think
it's Thomas Hardy. You may want to reread.
Yeah, are you sure they were?
That doesn't sound right.
Did no one die?
Maybe happier. It's all
for a time.
Their death was less gruesome and
Right.
despondent.
That's plausible.
We're thinking too much about Tess.
Yeah.
Tess is clouding us.
Yeah.
I think first of all that if you're single and you're pining under the moon and trying to figure out which direction you should take your life, and just stay single for a little while longer.
That seems right.
Just think on it a little bit more, and go back inside and stay away from the moon. Just think about it. Those things are what make a life. So, yeah. Stay single. I don't know. But no, I don't stay single. Marry. But it's not an easy decision. Yeah.
No. I'm for marriage. I actually don't believe that there is such a thing as a starving artist. I don't think artists will ever die of starvation.
They'll die of consumption, but not starvation.
Absinthe poisoning.
Yeah.
Ooh, can I sign up for the since we were talking about how I'm gonna die? that one.
No, but you're right. No artist
Yeah.
now is going to be dying of starvation.
Yeah. But practice your craft. Definitely, if you're single, keep working on your craft and don't let anybody take that away.
Yeah, I mean, certainly follow your passion, because your passion is where you're going to be happiest, I think. And I take that with a grain of salt because, engineering was really hard to get through in college, and I ended up doing a lot of artwork in college as well too, just to stay sane. So I kind of use art as my sanity outlet, and I do have a burning passion to keep creating like that. So I'm not trying to stifle anybody and say, you have to have something practical, but if you are passionate and talented and you can make a life out of it, then go for it, And marry somebody who's practical.
Keep going back.
Just learn how to be a little bit practical yourself. And don't expect for someone to support you unless that other person is really interested in doing that. Yeah.
I was going to say marry a wealthy older person
and
just inherit, but I guess what you're saying is making sense.
Jane Austen novel.
Marry a wealthy octogenarian with a bad heart.
Oh, gosh.
But I will sort of say, in closing, I think one of the points here is it's not like, should I marry an artist or a non-artist? I think it's more temperament and how supportive and collaborative they can be. So like Danielle does not consider herself an artist, but she appreciates art. She consumes a lot of good art. We can have really great conversations about it. She's always been extremely supportive of it. So in that sense, that's all the importance of the fact that she doesn't create her own is kind of beside the point there, because all the temperament stuff is there. But maybe to this situation, Elena, maybe the banker really enjoys reading good novels and would support this poor girl in her art. So that's
absolutely. I think the word we're reaching here for is sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have sympathy with each other.
Right, and if you don't have that in marriage, your marriage isn't going to work anyway. So don't marry the person that doesn't have sympathy with your calling and your vision and passion.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, that about takes us to the end of this episode. So thank you, everyone. I felt just a little bit like a fifth wheel, but not too much. So I appreciate you all doing that for me. But in closing, just a reminder that we are a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. So to find out more about the Anselm Society, visit anselm.org. We have a lot of content. We now are one of 3 podcasts in the Anselm Digital Pub table. So look at Redeemed Imagination and Speaking with Joy, both really, really great podcasts. And we have a lot of other very cool content coming, so keep your eyes peeled. And now, the Anselm quotation that I have spent a very long time searching for, and which I have almost found. That one's in French. God has made nothing more valuable than rational existence capable of enjoying him. Till next time, everybody.